They're blocking out the sun. The words left Lieutenant Grant's throat like stone hitting concrete, flat and final. Every man inside UEDC's orbital interface deck froze for half a breath. The solar readout on the upper heads-up display dipped again. On screen, the Earth hung, quiet and trembling, and beyond it, stretching in formation, came the Vorn fleet. Rows, columns, layers. 300 vessels moved into alignment without visible propulsion, casting long, angular shadows across Earth's daylight curve. The gridlock was surgical, calculated to interrupt comms relays and line of sight with every major satellite cluster. One passed directly above Brasilia. Its outline dragged a ripple through the upper atmosphere. Clouds deformed, bent outward as if shying away from something unseen. Commander Torin Vask didn't speak. He stood with both hands locked behind his back, boots squared on the steel plating of the Lunar Operations Core. The deck was cold underfoot. The vibration of localized shielding systems buzzed faintly through the walls, not with power, but with Visual confirms all 300, sir, said Gran, this time quieter. No open transmissions yet, no energy signatures pointed at us. They're holding. Ask then nod. He didn't blink. He was watching the Vorn flagship at the formation's center, a jagged hemisphere that looked like a crushed obsidian vault, unmoving, unblinking. No flicker of beacons, no ID pings, no attempt at broadcast negotiation. Only presence, the kind that suffocated breath before the first shot was ever fired. Then it came. UDC's wide-range receivers spasmed. All screens momentarily flashed raw input. Spike patterns, flooded with repetition. Symbols compressed to razor-like glyphs in geometric patterns. High-frequency pulses spiked through the command deck subfloor, causing lights to flicker and stabilizers to groan. The noise hit their ears like a low metallic scraping dragged through oil, layered with something beneath it, a clicking rhythm, far too ordered to be called noise. It stopped. Translate team report, Vask said without turning. They're not transmitting words, replied Darren Holt, head of linguistics, his skin already slick with sweat. It's protocol syntax, directive chains, not meant to be interpreted, meant to be obeyed. Vask narrowed his eyes at the display. Another spike hit. This time a segment broke free. Text appeared in static-wrapped lines across the secondary HUD. Earth, ERS, AST. Complex, or BERACS. Healed all artificial constructs and knowledge knows. Transmission final. Adjustments unnecessary. The deck fell into silence. The Vorn had spoken. The Earth Defense Council had feared a probe, maybe a long-range test, maybe even an envoy. Not this. Not a blockade so large it had weight, not in theory, in orbit. People on the ground were already filming shadows stretching over oceans. Comms from downlink channels confirm full global broadcast, sir, Gran murmured. They made sure the entire planet heard it. Vask finally turned. His eyes, gray and sharp with sleepless focus, moved across the faces of his staff. Young, all of them, scrambling between combat readiness drills and system redundancies that hadn't been updated in 5 years. Earth's defense protocols had been designed to intercept lone asteroids, maybe a pirate scout wing, not a galactic war fleet. He stepped toward the main interface, lifting a finger to a wall panel. With a single press, the Lunar Command's direct line to the Emergency Council opened. Faces bloomed across the upper curve of the laser plasma wall. Presidents, premiers, generals. All blinking, some shouting, a few demanding retaliation. We are not going to fire, Vask said clearly. We are not prepared for what's above us, not tactically, not technologically, and not philosophically. President Hallen of the North Atlantic Bloc leaned forward, face red and shaking. They've declared us a threat to galactic security. If we don't respond with force, they'll think we're weak. Vask cut in. But they don't know we're weak, Vask cut in. But they don't know we're unpredictable, and that's the only strength we have. Static buzzed again. The orbital map behind him redrew itself, displaying broken satellite routes. Over half of Earth communications were severed within 20 minutes of the Vorn arrival. Civilian networks were collapsing under panic traffic. Airports were down. Emergency broadcasts were clashing with unverified reports. From a side channel, Defense Systems Analyst Hezrick stepped forward, expression drawn. "Sir, we've completed diagnostics of planetary response capabilities. 12 stealth frigates remain functional. 2 are grounded due to reactor instability. The rest are outdated, slow, minimally shielded. We have surface-based anti-orbit rail systems, but they'll punch maybe 1 or 2 holes before retaliation incinerates the coastlines." Vask said nothing. He already knew the numbers. He'd known for weeks. His eyes traced the fleet again. The Vorn were rigid. Pattern-locked, their movement suggested command execution at large scale. No deviation, no exploration. Every formation was clean. No ships circled to gather atmosphere samples. None flared for scanning passes. It was as if they had already decided what Earth was, and what it wasn't. He turned to his team. "They don't investigate, they execute. Their decision is made. That tells us something critical." "They're brittle," said Holt, catching on. "If their assumptions crack, they don't adjust. They fall apart." Vask gave a single nod. "Exactly." The lunar base shuddered again, not from a hit, but from solar shielding recalibrating under stress. The lights dimmed briefly, then returned. In the background, UEDC's AI systems began compiling surface reaction reports. Riots in Jakarta. Power failures in New York. Aerial drones grounded in Lagos. Whole cities flickering off the map, not from strikes, but from fear. The world wasn't falling to enemy fire. It was falling to the shadow of the fleet. Vask leaned toward the command table, gaze fixed on the Earth's arc. "We don't have time to fix the world, so we don't try. We study the Vorn, we find their blindness, and we stab straight into it." Ron stepped forward, voice uneasy. "Sir? You're saying we don't engage at all?" "I'm saying we don't show them what we are, not yet." He pointed to the HUD. "They assumed the worst. Let's give them chaos, and make them doubt their assumptions." Across the chamber, the full room map shifted again, showing Vorn landing projections, Earth's compromised systems, and the silent dance of ships poised just beyond geosynchronous orbit. One breath, one heartbeat, and then, "Begin signal mimicry simulations," Vask ordered. "Find every city with underground transport networks and start staging falsified reactor events." They wanted a threat. Let them think we've already imploded trying to contain it. The council on the wall fell quiet. President Hallen spoke again, this time subdued. "If this works, they might come down to seize control." "And that," Vask said, turning back toward the viewport, "is when we speak in our language." His reflection in the screen was stark. Lined face, sharp jaw, uniform without medals. A man built for strategy, not for speeches. We couldn't outgun them, so we chose not to play their game. Torin Vask stared at the waveform looping across the data wall, his jaw locked. The lunar base lights had dimmed to conserve power across low perennity sectors, casting the command deck in a dull orange haze. Screens flickered, each frame packed with packets of intercepted quantum noise bursts, not language. Shaped, timed, pulsed, not random. Holt, hunched over the nearest terminal, ran his fingertips across the pattern segments like he was reading a foreign script with his bones. "These weren't weapons signals," he muttered, almost to himself. "This wasn't targeting data or encrypted command layers. They were predictive cycles, environmental." Vask didn't turn. "Show me the origin." Another analyst, Niran Trask, lean, silent, always at the margins, called up a series of location overlays. Each spike tracked back to climate engineering towers positioned around major ecological collapse zones, Saharan greenbelt trials, Siberian regrowth domes, submerged barrier pumps along the southeast Pacific fault line. "We were fixing the planet," Trask said grimly. "They thought we were loading a gun. Because we did it fast. Quiet. Encrypted beyond even civilian layers," Vask said, pacing toward the display. They saw a low-tier species leap generations in silence, and they assumed the worst. Gron moved beside him. Then why not send a scout? A delegation? They brought a fleet instead. Because the Vorn don't investigate, they eliminate variables. Vask's eyes narrowed as he read the signal payloads again. But if they acted on flawed assumptions once, they can do it again. And we can use that. The room held still. Just for a second. Then Holt pulled back from his station, blinking hard. You're saying we feed them new data? Fabricated data. I'm saying we show them what they already believe, Vask replied, but louder. He moved to the operations table and pulled open the system-wide signal override protocols. Global inputs flashed through the interface. Most satellites were offline, but Earth's subterranean broadcast arrays were still functional. Buried beneath oceans, deserts, and collapsed cities, leftovers from an age of panic and overbuilding. We stage failure, he continued. Radiation leaks, reactor surges, communication blackouts, city by city. We make them believe we're buckling under our own invention, let them think the technology they feared has turned against us. False chaos? Trask asked. Controlled disarray, Vask clarified. We won't convince them we're harmless, but we can convince them we're self-terminating. Gran's hands trembled slightly as he keyed into the map system. Sir, if we simulate meltdowns in metro zones, there'll be panic, unrest. We're throwing fire into an already cracked floor. Vask's voice dropped lower. We don't need control. We need noise. A flood of it, enough to drown their sensors in contradiction. He tapped on 3 locations. Manila, Johannesburg, and Madrid, each with deep underground heat exchange tunnels still tied into dormant climate systems. These cities still have thermal spires connected to abandoned early-gen reactors. We fake a cascading loss of coolant, accompanied by intermittent bursts of radiation spikes, include infrared distortions. Let their scanners confirm the chaos. Trask looked over the overlay. We'll need feedback loops, convincing ones. Use Earth's atmospheric moisture shift readings. Pair them with modulated seismic pings. Make the collapse feel organic, natural. Failure, not sabotage. Holt exhaled through his nose. They'll smell blood in the water. That's the point, Vask said. He turned to the uplink relay, fingers tapping in the command channel codes. Earth's remaining diplomatic outposts hadn't sent responses in hours. No confirmations, no countersigns. The silence was total. And in that quiet, Vask found clarity. They want to descend, he said softly. They're not sure what we are. They think we've built something we can't control. They want to secure it, study it, seize it. We land? Holt asked. They could just vaporize the cities. Because they want what's underneath. Vask pulled up the old maps. The tunnel networks, built during the resource wars, forgotten by most surface authorities. Layers upon layers of maintenance corridors, flood-resistant bunkers, decommissioned labs. All invisible to orbital scans. All still accessible. To a land to capture assets before they're lost, to preserve whatever they think we've built. That's where we take them. You want to bait them into urban insertion? Grind's eyes went wide. Sir, the Vorn have never been ground-lested. We don't even know if their infantry has autonomous capability. We'll find out. Ask issued the command to connect Earth's subterranean defense units. Their protocols were old, decentralized, and rarely used, but they were built for worst-case invasions. He ordered teams into position beneath the selected cities, armed with close-range disruptors, signal jammers, and non-bent-worked weaponry. Tell them nothing above ground is real, not the heat signatures, not the meltdown pulses, not even the citizens they'll hear screaming. They're illusions crafted from old disaster archives, loop footage. Splice live feeds with stock emergency footage from previous centuries. It's not truth, it's war paint. The room moved into quiet, intense focus. Fingers flew across consoles. Heat dispersal algorithms were routed through artificial spires. Seismic sensors were gently agitated with pressure nodes. Gran directed the timing overlays while Holt calibrated distortion levels using signal decay models stolen from old Martian terraforming logs. Trask rewired the false audio cues, radio chatter that simulated command breakdowns, panic, civilian evacuations that didn't exist. It wasn't deception, it was survival. One by one, cities began failing. Manila's core reactor throbbed with false feedback. Johannesburg's temperature towers mimicked steam overloads. Madrid's emergency lights flickered in perfect distress cadence. Earth looked like it was breaking apart. Above, the Vorn fleet rotated. Slightly. Their lead vessels shifted orbit to align with updated thermal points. Movement. Confirmation. They're buying it, Holt said, eyes glued to the orbital path changes. They're recalibrating trajectory to target insertion sites. Bask stepped back, hand dropping to his side. His uniform clung to him in places where recycled air never truly dried sweat. He glanced toward Earth, glowing in fractured light beneath the weight of its own deception. Let them step forward while they still believe we've already fallen. Steam coiled from a ruptured vent along the old subway shaft beneath downtown Seoul. The overhead grating had collapsed earlier during a structural test, intentionally destabilized to close escape routes behind the entry points. The tunnel walls sweated with condensation from the generator banks humming 3 sectors west. Dust clung to the air, stinging the eyes, clinging to the skin. It felt like breathing through rusted cloth. Corporal Dinar Voss dropped into a crouch beside a support beam, his rifle angled low. 3 others mirrored the movement in silence, eyes locked on the pressure door ahead. A faint rhythmic clink echoed from the far end of the passage, measured, unhurried. The Vorn didn't run. They advanced with confidence, like the ground was theirs by default. Confirm signal echo, Voss whispered into the throat mic. From the left flank, Sergeant Merrick gave a single nod, jaw clenched. The Vorn scout unit had entered the lower transit grid. Their path had matched the predictive model Vask's team had fed into the field simulators 4 hours earlier. They always chose symmetry. Always marched in identical intervals. Voss motioned to the control conduit behind him. Private Kelm slid forward, hands moving with practiced discipline. The manual valve lock snapped into place with a dull grind. Pressure surged behind the sealed bulkhead, flooding the top floor with scalding vapor through upper deck sprinkler vents. The trap was set. Above ground, Seoul's outer districts burned in mock chaos. Holographic flames, old seismic recordings, artificial EM interference, layered carefully to suggest breakdown, not staging. Vorn long-range scanners confirmed collapse, and so their response came as expected. Insert ground teams, isolate infrastructure, extract valuable nodes. The scout unit rounded the far corner of the passage. 4 upright figures moved in fluid arcs, tall and angular. Their exosuits shimmered faintly in the heat haze. Plated, jointed, not robotic, but something unnervingly exact. Their legs bent opposite to human locomotion, giving them a swaying gait like dancers climbing against wind. Their sensors flickered like glowing latticework across their helms, scanning each surface they passed. They stepped over a wire that wasn't real and missed the trip marker disguised as corrosion in the wall's steel. Now, Voss said. A flash charge ignited behind the unit, dropping a shockwave that crushed the ceiling above them. One Vorn vanished under the falling debris, another twisted, reacting fast, too fast, and was caught mid-turn by a kinetic dart to the neck joint. The remaining 2 scattered. That was the mistake. Corporal Voss leapt the railing, firing low. His boots skidded across the wet stone, shoulder slamming into the closest wall. The 3rd Vorn lunged for cover, but found none. Marek emerged from a crawl space to its right, point blanking an electro blade into the scout's chest unit. The blade jammed once. Brief contact, nothing more. But the Vorn staggered violently, its arm twitching out of sync with its torso. Kelm, disable the last one. The 4th Vorn turned, scanner module flickering as it recalibrated. It raised its left arm, a slanted weapon mechanism unfolding with insect-like precision. Kelm dove low, sliding across the slick ground, and jammed an overcharged signal disruptor into the alien's midsection. The Vorn seized, arms snapping outward like struck branches. Then it dropped. Vask watched it all unfold from the Lunar Command war room, hands gripping the edge of the steel-embedded interface table. Grainy footage fed in from 3 remaining satellites patched to short-range field uplinks. The scene cut through a dozen relay nodes before arriving, fragmentary, disjointed, but clear enough. Sol's understructure had been reclaimed. The Vorn had lost a full scout team. It was the first time since the blockade began that Earth's kill ratio wasn't 0. He reacted slower than predicted, Holt muttered, watching the rerun. But not dumb. One unit tried to cut power to the trap field. It just didn't have the right override protocol. Vask replied, designed for improvisation. Vask replied, they're factory built for order. Everything about them depends on pattern recognition. Throw them into nonlinear environments and they hesitate. Gores Grant entered from the back of the command room, holding a scorched alien device cradled in a heat-dampened polymer sleeve. It pulsed with red light across layered seams, silent but visibly active. Recovered from the scout leader, he reported. Looks like a relay unit, central signal router. Vask approached and studied the artifact. Its design was elegant in form, but its internals had already begun rerouting power cycles. Trying to connect, it was clearly part of a network far bigger than the scout patrol it accompanied. Get Trask to dissect its interface. I want to know what it talks to and how often. Holt leaned toward the secondary data bank, fingers flying across input relays. Sir, we may be able to reverse trace their signal logic. If this device calls out on a cycle, we could inject fabricated responses. Make the fleet above think their units are still operational. That buys us time, Vask said. And it tells us where they're blind. Gran stepped forward again. Sir, more field reports are coming in. Johannesburg tunnel teams neutralized 3 drones near the flood stations. Madrid has partial control of the eastern grid. We're holding territory, not permanently, but long enough to count. Vask's lips tightened. We don't hold anything. We move. We leave ghosts behind. Nothing they can trace. Every site gets burned the moment we extract. He turned back to the map, now pulsing with subtle red indicators, in 7 cities. All zones where guerrilla teams had engaged and survived. That was new. For a species with no claim to galactic status, Earth had just landed its first open wound. Status of the Vorn's orbiting posture. They've adjusted one wing of the fleet closer to Madrid, Gran said, but nothing coordinated, no full response. They're cautious now. Good, Vask murmured. That means the fleet's still listening to command nodes, and those nodes aren't sure what just happened. Holt watched the footage of the collapsed tunnel ceiling and Sol again, rewinding frame by frame. We broke a piece off their protocol tree. Even if it's small, it's something they never prepared for. Vask let the silence hang a moment. The map glowed. Earth was still smoldering, still bleeding. But now, it bled with purpose. For all their sensors, he said, they never looked beneath their own feet. The Vorn probe hit tundra like a stone skipping across ice. Only, it didn't stop. It carved a wound 3 kilometers wide into the northern arc of Novaya Zemlya before plowing into bedrock and folding in on itself. Half of it burned. The other half hissed beneath layers of fractured permafrost. Its surface still shedding ambient pulses like a heart that didn't know it was dead. 10 hours later, it was dragged beneath Earth's surface by autonomous lifters and lowered into UEDC's Siberian cryo vault. The entire bay was sealed off. Entry protocols required 4 retinal confirmations, 3 biotag commanders, and 3 blast doors made of reinforced ceramic geographene plating. Nothing from orbit could track its signal. Not anymore. Torin Vask stood at the viewing panel beside Trask and Lormak, the chief systems engineer. The air in the lab felt thick, not from temperature but from the overlapping sounds of diagnostic arms clamping, probes boring, and cables feeding data into static-wrapped cores. Every movement inside was tethered to one purpose. Internal structure follows a pattern, Lormak muttered, crouched beside the carcass with gloves up to his elbows. Not built for versatility, engineered for continuity. Every node leads back to a single behavior control relay. Command relay? Vask asked, watching the visual feed cast across the wall. More like a spine. The fleet doesn't operate in loose coordination. It reacts as one. Trask scrolled through layered diagrams of the Vorn's quantum signal matrix. The web was dense, but already Earth's engineers had begun slicing it apart, decoding not just the frequency, but the intention embedded in the structure. They're not autonomous, not even partially, Trask said. Every ship, every drone, every scout on the ground, they respond to a central nexus aboard their command vessel. They don't share authority. They distribute execution. Vask folded his arms. So, we don't need to defeat the whole fleet. We just need to silence one ship. Silence fell. Not fear. Not hesitation. Lormek pulled up a magnified cross-section of the recovered data crystal extracted from the probe's primary transmitter. The lattice embedded inside had been damaged, but its rhythm had continued pulsing. A heartbeat wired for loyalty. One command source, one operational echo chamber, and one Achilles tendon. I can build a ghost, he said finally. Something that doesn't look like interference. Something that blends with the relay feedback patterns. If it gets close enough, it can fragment their operational loops. Not destroy. Confuse. Interrupt. They'll stall like systems looking for a missing heartbeat. And how long would that confusion last? Vask asked. Long enough to trigger fallback behaviors. Error cycles. Fleet-wide hesitation. That's all we need. Delay, disruption, not damage. Trask added. But the ghost has to be inserted physically. No remote injection. Their encryption won't accept interference from a source outside the sync lattice. That meant one thing. We launch a carrier, Vask said. He turned to the operations feed and called up available orbital craft. Most were grounded. One remained unlisted. Decommissioned, stripped, listed as debris in the upper exolayer grid. Frigate Ravelin still frame intact, still shielded with orbital wreckage panels from the Titan Belt exercises. You'll bury the signal disruptor in Ravelin's data chamber. It gets close to the command vessel, drifts into its outer scan net, and injects the ghost directly into the core. We'd be asking a pilot to fly within range of 32 enemy warships, Trask said. No. Vask shook his head. We're asking him to float. Within the hour, the stealth craft was brought back into operational readiness inside the South Atlantic Orbital Maintenance Deck. The pilot assigned was Lieutenant Haran Thesk, a combat-trained systems navigator from the Lunar Reconnaissance Wing. He arrived at the briefing silent, eyes bloodshot, fingers twitching against the flight pad on his hip. Not out of fear, out of anticipation. Vask laid out the plan without elevation in his voice, no flourish, no weight. Just tasks. You'll approach using Ravelin's existing debris camouflage. The fleet won't scan for thermal shifts. They don't expect anything dead to move. You drift on a lateral trajectory toward the Vorn's central ship. Once you cross into its passive comms range, the disruptor will trigger. Thesk didn't nod. He just adjusted the gloves on his flight suit and asked, "What happens if they scan me during trajectory drift?" Then you detonate your suit charge, shatter the disruptor, leave nothing traceable. Understood. Vask stepped closer, lowering his voice. No speeches, no medals, just results. Wouldn't accept either, Thesk said, stepping toward the launch corridor. 3 hours later, the Ravelin departed. No flare, no beacon, no sign of motion from Earth's planetary defense grid. To the Vorn, it was background noise, a crippled satellite caught in orbital decay. They let it slide into position without contest. Inside the lunar base, Vask watched the drift vectors update in real time. The Ravelin's body shimmered faintly on the satellite tracker, barely a ghost at the edge of artificial awareness. Its temperature was dialed to match orbital debris. Its onboard systems operated on analog pulses, too slow for scan nets, too smart to trip automated alerts. Contact range in 60 seconds, Trask announced. Below, the Vorn fleet began shifting, minor, incremental, but enough to show they were still pulsing orders through the nexus. That meant The ship was alive. The signal was still cycling. The disruptor device flicked green. Drift complete. Then silence. The Ravelin stopped broadcasting. Grant looked over at Vask. Is it in? Vask kept his eyes on the feed. If the fleet breaks formation within the next hour, we'll know. They waited. And then it happened. On screen, the leading flank of the Vorn fleet veered off trajectory by 17 degrees. A ship to its right rotated unevenly. Its stabilizer drift loop failed to correct. Several others entered holding patterns without command confirmation. The system had stuttered. The command chain had blinked. The ghost had landed. Vask leaned back, the tension in his shoulders refusing to ease. Not yet. Not until every Vorn ship held still. He looked at the map one final time before turning away. The cleaner the strike, he said, the louder the silence it leaves behind. The debris field looked like a graveyard of ambition. Broken hull plates, shredded solar wings, cracked thermal shells, all slowly circling in Mars' orbital pull. Somewhere within it, Ravelin floated, still, cold, and nameless. Inside the Earth command room, deep beneath Luna's regolith, the temperature had dropped 2 degrees. Not by malfunction, but because no one moved. The room was locked in calculation. Torin Vask stood beside Trask and Gran, eyes fixed on the updated orbital telemetry. Object velocity? Vask asked. 0.22 relative drift, Trask answered. They haven't flagged it, still reading it as junk mass. On screen, the Vorn fleet stood like a wall across low orbit. Tiered in strict formation, their ships glinted with steady lines of containment lights, every vessel linked by communication pulses cycling at exact intervals. The flagship sat in the center, a geometric monster that looked less like it was built and more like it had grown there. They're scanning deep band frequencies, Grant muttered, internal diagnostics. Their cycles haven't deviated in 13 minutes. They will, Vask said, when they lose the heartbeat. Inside Ravelin, Lieutenant Thesk was strapped to his harness, fingers twitching over the analog release interface. He couldn't see the fleet. His viewport was frosted by a layer of heat-resistant shielding that masked any internal glow. But the instruments on his suit were still alive. They pulsed against his ribcage, counting down the final seconds to proximity sync. Disruptor cycle at full charge, Thesk whispered, as if the sound might pierce the hull. Injection vector aligned. He pulled the lever. The device hissed once, no louder than a wire cut under pressure. A pulse of data left Ravelin's spine, slipping through the communications veil like a splinter in soft tissue. It entered the Vorn fleet's outer mesh without resistance. There was no defense against it, because the command nexus didn't expect it. It was broadcast in their own cadence, crafted from their own signal map. The virus didn't scream, it whispered in protocol. Inside the command vessel, unseen by human eyes, command confirmation cycles stalled. Fleet-wide clocks skipped by milliseconds, then by more. Back in the Earth command chamber, the fleet display shifted. Ship 2-6 off alignment, Trask announced, eyes locked on the stream. 294 rotating, not recovering to arc, Grom followed. Show me their sync loops, Vask ordered. The data rolled in. Fleet systems were failing to echo instructions. Ships began orbiting each other, not because of tactical maneuvering, but because they had lost collective direction. Stabilizers fired in error, engine output drifted, communication latency surged. What are they doing? Gran asked. They're waiting, Vask said. Automated fallback behavior kicked in, ships returned to basic pathing. But no new orders came, the Nexus wasn't dead. It was uncertain. The signal now inside it spoke in contradiction. One loop said hold, one said adapt, one said verify. The Vorn didn't improvise. Now, Vask said. Ross turned toward the signal override board. The captured Vorn commander, still held within a magnetic restraint shell deep beneath the Arctic command node, had been prepped for one purpose. Broadcast. Vask had extracted a single phrase from him earlier, one burned into their honor hierarchy. Surrender before the loss of purpose. preserves the shape of disgrace. They played that phrase through Vorn comms. The translation was perfect. The tone was modeled on their own acoustic frequency system. It didn't even need amplification. They heard it the moment it transmitted. One by one, the fleet's lights dimmed. From Earth's orbit, every amateur astronomer watching the fleet noticed it. Dozens of vessels rotated without synchronization, others locked in place. Power levels equalized across tiers, not because of orders, but from a system trying to reset command pathways and failing to resolve contradiction. "They're frozen," Trask said, barely breathing. "No," Vask replied. "They're suspended between belief and proof." He stepped forward and tapped the captured commander's feed once more, playing the phrase again. This time, it was routed across 3 of the Vorn's own sub-frequencies. Carefully mimicked, structurally sound. Inside their fleet's logic chain, the command had already been tagged as valid. Hearing it again triggered a loop. More ships fell out of alignment. "Flagship's beacon dimming," Gran announced. "Control signal from the Nexus is dropping." "We hit the core," Vask confirmed. "They can't validate movement without chain-confirmed hierarchy, and now, every path they follow contradicts the last." The war room fell into a heavy quiet. One of Earth's deep-scan satellites caught the moment 2 Vorn ships collided. Not explosive, just a slow, grinding impact, as 2 directionless masses followed overlapping correction routines. They drifted backward from each other, like dancers forgetting their choreography. "I don't trust their own protocol anymore," Trask said. "They've never encountered a command chain they couldn't parse." "Now they have," Vask replied. From the dark edges of orbit, Ravelin drifted away, its disruptor spent, its hull drifting into Martian gravity. Tesk's final location was lost to telemetry. No beacon returned, no signal confirmed. A silent grave. But his strike had landed. "Their weapons remain live," Gran reminded. Bosk shook his head. "But they won't fire, because they can't confirm whether they're shooting at a threat or reacting to a lie." The orbital map continued to flicker, but no retaliatory signal emerged. The fleet remained, weapons charged. But no one dared to fire without permission. That wouldn't come. The docking clamp locked into place with a crunch that echoed through the Earth delegation's shuttle floor, like 2 bones setting after a break. Inside, the air shifted, not pressurized, not hostile, simply foreign. No alerts followed, no challenge code, no automated protocol to reject the entry. Porin Vask stood near the hatch, suited, sealed, and still. Behind him, 3 members of the delegation waited in disciplined silence. Trask, carrying the playback cores, Janin, head of linguistic overlay, and Kren Hollis, former intelligence attaché who'd spent 2 decades observing behavioral patterns across non-human command systems. "Final comms scan before breach," Vask ordered. Janin keyed into the uplink. "No shift in signal behavior. The flagship's outputs remain frozen. Secondary channels looping internal failsafes. If they were preparing weapons, we'd see sync compression." Vask tapped the release. The hatch rolled open. The Vorn corridor was sterile. Not clean, clinical. It looked unfinished, as if function mattered so completely that even texture was ignored. No sound rose to greet them. No guides appeared. The lights flickered across the ceiling at fixed intervals, revealing a hallway with symmetrical pillars etched in sharp carvings that didn't feel decorative, only regulatory, like everything had to be defined by border. They stepped forward, boots clinking against a composite floor that was neither polished nor dulled, only efficient. Air pressure stabilized at their 3rd step. Temperature rose to match human survivability, which meant one thing. They'd been expected. The corridor ended in a chamber flanked by ridged columns, tall and narrow. In its center stood the Vorn secondary commander, alone, flanked by no guards, no aides, no sentries. His suit was deep black, with layered segments running from neck to knee, a breathing apparatus pulsing along his spine in timed intervals. His arms were folded behind him, posture still, as if bracing not for impact, but for consequence. Vask stepped forward. You ordered a blockade over a misread signal. The translator cuff on his left wrist carried his words across 3 Vorn tonal structures, refined over the last 5 days by Earth's language division using fragments drawn from the captured scout commander and relay logs. The resulting phrase struck clear. The Vorn officer shifted, not with discomfort but with recalibration. I act on data, the being replied through the translator, the language rendered in harsh, clipped syllables, mathematical, not expressive. Your world surged activity across concealed quantum layers, interference patterns echoed conflict. You saw signal density, you assumed threat, you launched 300 warships before asking a question. Vask reached into his chest pouch, pulled the crystal chip and handed it to Trask. Trask moved forward, plugged the data into the relay node positioned at the edge of the room. A projection map emerged, not in light but in kinetic ripple. Tactile data formed from proximity pulses that reshaped the floor's surface into a dynamic topography. It displayed the original pattern, the signal Earth had emitted. But then it broke apart, peeled back and rewound. Layer by layer, the projections revealed the source fields. Environmental towers, ecological repair nodes, AI-hardened water networks, atmospheric recalibrators. Vask walked around the display. We were repairing climate systems. These were conservation algorithms, restoration loops. Your interpretation was flawed. The Vorn officer stared. Not with eyes. Those were narrow slots, filtered through a network of photonic membranes. But with attention. He leaned forward. Data loops rotated. He studied them the way Earth's engineers studied stress fractures. Quietly, internally, without reaction. Until finally he stepped onto the projection pad, letting the ripple pass across his limbs. When he spoke again, it was quieter. Your planet accelerated development without exposure. Pattern deviation without shared progression creates threats. That wasn't your judgment to make. No. The Vorn stepped off the pad. It was the Concord's collective duty to ensure systemic stability. You disrupted that arc. Vask didn't flinch. We improved our system. You mistook silence for hostility. He waved to Janin. She tapped her sleeve. The recording began. A segment of Vorn comms played back, the moment when the ghost virus entered the fleet relay and caused the Nexus to misfire. The Vorn commander didn't interrupt. Vask didn't ask for permission. He played the next fragment, the captured scout commander's surrender call, translated, then looped through Vorn subfrequencies, the message that froze their fleet, the words that broke their hierarchy. Finally, Vask activated the core evidence. Side-by-side signal trails, Earth's real climate protocols next to the Vorn's misinterpreted threat simulations. You mistook growth for aggression. Miscalculation at this scale isn't just careless, it's unfit for leadership. The Vorn's hands tightened behind his back. He walked once around the perimeter of the chamber. His breath regulator clicked faster. Not anger. Computation. You broadcast surrender through a fractured officer. You'll outrank no one, Vask replied, but your fleet stopped anyway. The silence that followed was not empty. It was weighted by something far older than tension. Fear of system breach. For the Vorn, doctrine wasn't just a strategy. It was order. Disruption wasn't defeat. It was identity fracture. You seek recognition, the Vorn commander said slowly. No, Vask answered. We seek correction. Of record, of assumption, and of consequence. The Vorn inclined his head. Then you intend diplomacy under weight of embarrassment. We intend memory under weight of fact. A long pause stretched. Then the Vorn lifted his arm and placed a datapod on the central pedestal. It opened, its symbols reshaping in the format Earth's linguists had designated as confirmation code. A ceasefire packet. Digital. Formal. Authenticated by internal fleet timestamps. No apology, but withdrawal. No admission, but recalibration. Vask didn't smile. He didn't need to. This wasn't a negotiation, he said, stepping off the platform. It was a reckoning written in their own grammar. The chamber at the center of the Vorn flagship had changed. Not its structure, not its air, but its silence. Before, it carried dominance. Now, it held something else. The delegation from Earth stood at the far end, beneath recessed lighting that hummed with uneven pulses, each bulb responding to a separate power node. Joints in the walls no longer sealed tightly. Even their machines showed doubt. Commander Torin Vask didn't speak yet. He allowed the moment to thicken. The datapod containing the ceasefire packet rested on the negotiation platform between both parties, still unopened. Not because Vask lacked trust, but because Vask hadn't allowed it to be reviewed until conditions were clear. The Vorn secondary commander stood with both hands extended at his sides. Not bound, not postured, simply present. The armor segments around his midsection pulsed slower now. Their glow had faded since the virus strike. "Your terms," the Vorn said, his translator embedded in a corner of the wall. "We await the schema." Vask stepped forward, handing Janin a compact slate. She opened the treaty framework, nothing ornamental, nothing decorated. Just language. Simple clauses, clear lines. Human structure. Unified standard top to bottom. Not the Concord's legal tongue. Not Vorn logic glyphs. Earth's written system. Structured, assertive, deliberate. The Vorn scanned the document. His eyes did not move. Earth had learned that their vision was panoramic. The language required no translation this time. The Vorn had already ingested it through internal data converters. What struck him was not the meaning but the format. He was being asked to sign in a dialect that had, until weeks ago, been classified as primitive. You request recognition using unratified syntax. I demand it, Vask corrected. The Vorn's limbs shifted. Not resistance. Not acceptance. A realignment of posture. The kind species used when their internal systems were recalibrating purpose. This script is not Concord sanctioned. It is now battlefield validated, Vask answered. You mistook that language for a threat. You brought war to it. You'll now write peace in the same form. Trask stepped forward and activated Earth's uplink terminal, patched through to 5 orbital satellites that had been restored just hours earlier. Their signal was strong, bouncing down across every national broadcast line on Earth. Images flickered onto thousands of screens, from civilian bunkers to military chambers. Earth was watching. The Vorn knew this. We won't issue this record in your network, the commander said. We already have, Janin replied. Earth's signature will be filed, time-stamped, and authenticated by its own courts. Your agreement, your name, and the fleet's withdrawal, all documented through our verification standard. The Vorn's gaze settled back on Vask. You treat victory as heritage? We treat misjudgment as something to be remembered. The data pod opened. The signature field flared in unified standard, digitally rendered in Earth's formatting protocols. Nothing symbolic, only structured clarity. The Vorn commander raised his left forearm, pressed his command digit into the interface node. The panel registered the contact, converted his seal, and accepted the terms. The treaty locked, signed, confirmed. Overhead, Earth's satellites broadcast the footage. It streamed to every screen still online, across the South American bunkers, through the African transport hubs, across Pacific Island research labs, where power was rationed by solar drip and turbine schedules. They saw it. An alien commander signing terms in Earth's tongue. Inside Luna Command, the chamber erupted. No celebration, just relief. Earth didn't cheer. It steadied itself. The weight wasn't lifted, it was shifted. History had been written not with missiles, but with memory. Back aboard the Vorn flagship, the commander turned. His fleet had already begun to disengage. One after another, ships peeled from their orbital grid, vectors pointing away from Earth's gravitational lock. No blasts, no resistance. They moved like instruments set back in their cases. As the Earth delegation returned to their shuttle, the Vorn commander followed them to the threshold. "You were never accounted for in our doctrine," he said. "That was your failure," Vask replied without pausing. The Vorn didn't respond. Instead, he did something Earth had not witnessed from their species. He bowed, not deep, not ceremonial, but unmistakable, a shift of posture that carried recognition. Then, in Earth's language, spoken through the internal translator but keyed in his voice, he added, "We never knew how to lose. Now we do." The air inside the corridor didn't change, but the moment thickened with a kind of stillness that no tactical outcome could imitate. Back on Luna, Vask watched the returning shuttle cross into landing range. Earth's skies were no longer filled with shadows. He turned away from the viewport. "They didn't bow to power," he said, walking toward the operations chamber. "They bowed to proof." The summit chamber on Earth hadn't been used in 50 years. Half the cables were hand-set through floors rebuilt from disused civil tunnels. No luxury, no screens wider than shoulder pan. Yet it held the weight of a planet. Torin Vask sat at the far end of the table, no longer in uniform. Civilian tunic, gray-lined, collar stiff but unadorned. He didn't speak unless asked. He wasn't in charge. He had done his part. Now the world had to follow through. Representatives from every surviving block filled the chamber. Some wore badges. Some simply arrived with facial bruises still healing from protests days prior. But they all sat. No one walked out. The war hadn't united them. Failure had. And Earth, for the first time in its fractured memory, didn't look away from what nearly ended it. President Hallen of the North Atlantic Pact opened the floor. "We vote now," he said. "No extensions, no regional clauses. Either we sign together or we dissolve this attempt and accept the risks." One by one, they placed biometric stamps into the table interface. No ceremony, only coordination. Within the hour, Earth's first unified governance charter became binding. The Global Defense Pact banned all autonomous orbital weapons without direct human oversight. It absorbed the surviving civilian space networks under one Operations Council. The UEDC was dissolved and reformed into the Earth Diplomatic Corps, built not around militaries, but around translators, psychologists, and long-range systems analysts. Vask refused the director role. He accepted a seat on the advisory board with one condition. His words could not be altered in council transcripts. If he warned, they would listen. If he spoke, they would record it in full. 3 weeks later, repurposed climate AIs launched back into low orbit. This time, they weren't guarding weather patterns or stabilizing sea levels. They monitored incoming galactic signals. Not to hide, but to prepare. Inside the underground research vault once used to decrypt Vorn protocol, Earth's engineers began mapping the intercepted Vorn tech. The command nexus structure remained forbidden. No Earth system was allowed to replicate the control loop used by the Vorn. But fleet shielding, energy dispersal nodes, and non-invasive signal masking, all of it was dissected, re-engineered, and rebuilt for defense. No weapons were manufactured. That wasn't policy, it was principle. Vask watched from Luna as the last of Earth's orbital scars disappeared beneath atmospheric repairs. Fires from Johannesburg had gone. The false reactor sites were dismantled. Madrid's Spire grid had been repurposed into a communication hub. Seoul's tunnel network was now a training facility for subterranean diplomacy protocols. They weren't building forts, they were teaching others how to avoid building them in the first place. 3 months after the withdrawal, a broadcast arrived from a species previously dormant within Concord channels. Not a threat, not a warning, a query. Translated simply, "We heard what you did, may we speak." It came from the Halrics, a species Earth had no direct contact with, but whose language had been detected in older Concord archives. Their transmission used Earth's format. Unified standard. Not imposed. Chosen. More followed. By the end of the cycle, 7 separate galactic actors had reached out through the channels Earth now operated. None of them used Concord glyphs. Earth's language had become more than structure. It had become memory, A record of defiance, of mistakes, of survival. Back at the lunar observatory, Vask spent most of his hours in silence. The chamber was built from reconstituted thermal shielding slabs, layered for solar resistance. No insignias. Just reinforced stone and glass. He stood alone near the edge, arms folded as he watched the ship trails fade into distant streaks across the sky. Gron visited once, no appointment, just walked into the observatory and set down a datapad beside him. "They're teaching kids the treaty and primary curriculum now," he said. "All of it, not just the signing, the virus, the collapse, the speech you gave in the corridor." "I didn't give a speech," Vask said. "You gave them a mirror, that was louder." Vask didn't answer. He didn't have to. Below them, Earth rotated steadily in full view. Blue had returned to coastlines that were once gray with heat haze. The cloud systems had reshaped into normal patterns again. Not because of weapons, because of effort, because of a planet that had learned to look upward with caution, not fear. "You ever think they'll come back?" Gran asked. "HFY might," Vask replied. "And if they do, we'll be ready." Not armed, just understood. Graham gave a short nod and stepped away. He didn't wait for a goodbye. Vask stayed until the stars sharpened in the upper viewplate, the lens adjusting to let in the next wave of transmissions from Earth's atmosphere. More signals, more languages, none of them Concord. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They had declared Earth a danger. Now they spoke in Earth's words, signed in Earth's script, and steered clear of Earth's orbit. That was enough. If a superior empire misread your peaceful advance and came with 300 warships, would you forgive the mistake or make them regret ever learning your name? Let us know in the comments. Then hit subscribe for more brutally strategic, emotionally charged HFY stories.